on, let's get some of the lads together. Let's have a good idea. Okay, yeah, all right. Go on, fellas. Get around the piano. Let's have a good go. Come on, then. You ready? Come on, you lot. Go on, then.
Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The imps are here to stay. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The imps are here to stay. Lincoln City are the team, the Ravens is their name. Sincil Bank is their home ground and football is their game. So come and cheer them on, you mad, support them all the way. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white, the imps are here to stay. Oh, 'tis our delight.
Morning, City fans. How we doing? So I've got to try in a short walk with the ever unwilling dog to pick the bones out of the last 72 hours or a 72-hour window, which is not going to be particularly easy in such a short space of time. I'm not on the podcast this week. It's Jake and Ben. Obviously, myself and Chris were away at the weekend in Germany, and both Ben and Jake travelled. So it would be wrong for me or Chris to try and to go on the podcast and talk in any depth about the game because we weren't there. So it gives me an opportunity to have a chat to you on here, I think, about it. And just to clarify as well, I haven't waited until we've won a game to come on. I came back from Germany on Monday, had a few bits to do, didn't work on Monday, didn't sort of get up, walk the dog particularly early. And then yesterday, as I'm sure you're aware, when you come back from holiday, you have to ring and tell people. So I spoke to my mum, etc., on the dog walk yesterday morning. So that's why you didn't get a video. You didn't get a video because I was shying away from it, and it would be easy for me to gloss over Chippenham in this chat. I'm not going to go on too long about it, but I think to appreciate last night's result, you have to go back to Saturday. You have to go and encompass both of these kind of trips down to the West Country in the two traditional cups. And for me, I'm going to, this might sound negative, but our win last night was in what I consider to be the third most important trophy to Lincoln City. Doesn't diminish the win at all, but I would be a hypocrite if I said anything else, because in the past, I've always stated quite clearly that I saw the League Cup as, worthless until you get to the fourth or the fifth round, which we have only done once prior to last night in our history. So, but we'll go back to Chippenham. Look, I don't want to gloss over the Chippenham game. The two games are so similar, but seen from different perspectives, because we went to Chippenham expecting really to win as supporters and as a football club. Obviously, Chris and I in Germany we kind of watched the St. Pauli game. They lost 1-0, and then it's like, right, what's the team? What experiments is he going to pull on us, Mark Kennedy? Because you expect that we should be able to put out a weakened team and win this game. That's arrogance, and that's the arrogance that, unfortunately, every single football fan has to a certain degree. The first thing when that most fans thought when the Chippenham tie came out was winnable. First thing. And whether the manager felt, whether his hand was forced into his team selection, which certainly it was to a degree when you look at some of the injuries, whether he felt we could, change things up a little bit, I don't know. It was a relatively strong side. We didn't field like 11 sort of reserves or anything in that game. But I think that supporters and the culture around the club, not Mark Kennedy, not the players, but the general culture around the club was, we will go to Chippenham and we should win that game. And you look at other FA Cup games, MK Dons put in 6 past Taunton Town, for instance. Yeah, that's what you should be doing against lower league teams, right? But it's not always that easy, and it isn't just us, and people think that it is. So you'll say, oh, it's typical Lincoln, couldn't beat Bowers last year, couldn't beat such and such, couldn't beat Chippenham this year. Correct. We did beat Bowers, sorry, but couldn't hammer Bowers last year. And then you look at Cambridge drawing 0-0 with, and off the top of my head, I can't remember, I think it was Colville in the first round, I might be wrong. You look at Torquay holding Derby. These things happen in the FA Cup. We have been the David slaying the Goliath. When you look at Brighton and you look at Ipswich, you look at Burnley, you look at Oldham. And when you think about the kind of the differences between the teams, really their win, Chippenham's beating us, was a similar level to us beating Bolton, albeit as you get higher the teams get much better. I'd probably put it more on a par in terms of the gulf between the teams with us and Ipswich. I don't want to do Chippenham a disservice. They worked incredibly well. They stuck to their task. on a different day, we get the rub of the green, the disallowed goal stands, we get a draw. Probably we should have put the ball in the back of the net. We didn't. I'm not going to take anything away from Chippenham Town at all. I'm really not. But the overreaction afterwards was, eyebrow raising, and I was as guilty of it. Now, as you know, I keep saying, so I was in Cologne. We got back to the hotel for a clean up after the game. We were going to go out, and the final whistle came whilst we were in the hotel cleaning up and getting ready to go back out. And the evening was then dominated by just this awful dark feeling comes over again, as it did when we lost to Cambridge 2-0 in the league. Each chapter that suggests negativity, because we're so early in this journey with Mark Kennedy, you think that is a defining moment. You're 25 games in. We haven't been able to penetrate properly for 3 games. Port Vale, Accrington, and Chippenham. Very different games, by the way. Port Vale, we were poor, but they were, they're a League One side. Accrington, I thought we did enough probably to score 2 or 3, and on another day with a little bit more clinical finishing, that game's done and dusted by half time. And then Chippenham, which, taking away the difference between the two teams, they were committed, they were organised, they made it very hard for us. And people say, why can't we play against Chippenham like we did last night against Bristol? We can't, because they put more men behind the ball, they kept it tighter, they were more committed to not conceding and hitting us on the break. Bristol City were never going to do that, so that's probably why there was a difference. But that darkness was awful after the game, and even I was feeling, I remember sitting with Chris and saying, such and such isn't good enough. This isn't right. We've got these players injured. The recruitment in the summer should have brought in another striker. You're looking for reasons to justify what is basically a massive, huge, great big kick in the bollocks, because that's what it was. 1-0 to Chippenham. And you think, oh, we're the headlines. We're the ones that have been slayed. We're the giant kill. We'll go to Bristol City. We'll get nothing. We're not going to score, blah, blah, blah. It sets that off. I get it. And I now think usually before I go on social media, and it's not as easy for other people to keep those emotions in check, and I can empathise with that. I can empathise with people who football means so much to, and Lincoln City means so much to, that they react, they lash out, they kick out. And my dad doesn't do it on the internet, but he's very much the same. If we've lost a game at home or drawn a game we should have won at home, he's anger with him when we're on our way, and he will be lashing out at anybody and everybody he can. This wasn't good enough, that wasn't good enough. And then by the time we get to the car, or by the time it's the Ivy Club, if we go for a drink, things just simmered down and calmed down. I get that, I understand that. But the Chippenham game was a real blow. However, I'll go through some of the comments, but Kate's absolutely right. Only Lincoln could lose to a side 3 divisions below us and then beat one from the league above in the space of 4 days, and that's it. How many people after the Chippenham game said, we'll just about go and beat Bristol City now? More than most, more than normal. Absolutely, because it is so typically Lincoln City, specifically this Lincoln City, Mark Kennedy's Lincoln City, and to a degree probably the Lincoln City that we've seen post-Cowley. We have been superb at going to these big teams, and whether that's the league above as it was this time, or whether it's teams that should be in the league above like Ipswich, like Sheffield Wednesday. Why is it raining? There's not a cloud in the sky. I'm getting rained on. We're so good at giving those teams a game, and then the teams that we think we're going to roll over, the Port Vales and the Accringtons and the Morecambs and teams like that, do us. That's Lincoln at the moment. So why last night were we so good? Why did we do so well? Well, first of all, we played a team that want to attack us, and that kind of suits us, especially with the 3 at the back, which got so much stick on Saturday. Without the 3 at the back, we lose last night. So it's kind of like 1 minute it's the result, it's all the evils, and the next minute it's genius. And as I want to say a young manager, he's got 30 years or whatever in the game. As a young manager in his kind of first job as the figurehead, Mark Kennedy won't want to be chopping from one formation to another formation to another formation. He'll want to get these patterns of play, and he'll want to get his ethos and his kind of style into the side, and to get some consistency. Consistency was what we lacked last season, certainly across the back. How many different combinations did we play against across the back last season? 23, 24, something like that. So what we're looking for here, yes, we're chopping and changing the odd bit of personnel, but predominantly the three across the back gives you a little bit more stability and security. Certainly did last night. So that's one reason. I also think last night the midfield players had a little more space and time on the ball. It was a big, expansive pitch at Ashton Gate. Obviously, I've looked back at some of the highlights this morning, and Matty Virtue was outstanding. Max Sanders was a little more clinical than perhaps it was suggested he was on Saturday. And that allowed us to transition quite quickly as well. And I'm not talking about long ball when I say quick transition. I'm talking about a slicker passing game, one-touch passing. You only have to look at the opening goal for lovely sort of instances of one-touch passing. I think Vernon was involved. I think Rowan was involved. I think it was Rowan's assist. And then obviously the sort of finish that when you talk about XG stats, it'll be 0.04, but it's a hell of a finish. And 9 times out of 10 it goes wide, or the keeper holds on to it, or it's a daisy cutter or something like that. So yeah, I think it's just a completely different type of game, and we're more suited to that type of game. That doesn't say that if we were to go up, by the way, that we would be contenders in the Championship. But it does mean that we know how to play against these bigger teams. And as we said, I think after the Barnsley and the Ipswich games, what we have to do is figure out a way of playing against some of the smaller teams. I also think last night was a big moment for a couple of the players who perhaps this season people have considered to be fringe players. Charles Vernon, been really unlucky. I thought he had a good game against Doncaster when we lost 2-1, or in patches. I think he's got that little bit of something that you need as a winger. He can drop a shoulder, he tries to beat players, he tries to get past players. It didn't come off for him on Saturday, and I saw some people sort of with a little bit of stick for him, but it did come off yesterday. I thought he looked like he had a really good game. And Tashan was hammered early doors the first couple of games. And bear in mind, this is a kid that barely played football for a year, had been out of favour at Stoke. And at the moment, he's kind of out of favour here. But every time I see him, he looks like he's got, these are phrases from the managers now, but he looks like he's got nice feet, he knows how to look after the ball, but also he's more of the attacking midfielder. Some people kind of think about midfielders as just midfielders. Others think, where you a defensive midfielder, kind of a box-to-box central midfielder. Difference between, say, Liam Redcock, Conor McGrandles, and George Grant, all midfielders to a degree, but all very, very different midfielders. Tashan, for me, is more of the George Grant style player, more of the Ted Bishop style player. Now, if you are going to pick apart teams like Accrington or Port Vale, Chippenham, you need more players like that on the field. And okay, Tashan played kind of out wide, tucked in a little bit, and there was a lot made of him and Charles Vernon's starting position to get closer to House. So we'll come on to it in a second. But I think that Tashan and Charles Vernon showed the intent that we'd hoped to see more regularly. And Mark Hone on the radio said, play like that against Morecambe, we'll win 4-5-0. We won't play against Morecambe like that because there'll be far more compact, there'll be far less space, there'll be far less kind of pockets for us to find. You have to work a lot harder to create the chances. We worked hard to create the chances last night, but I think we worked as hard to try and create the chances against Accrington, for instance. It's just when you're playing at Bristol City and they want to push on and they want to create chances, it's easier to know where the areas in which to work hard, if that makes sense. And the other thing, Pete's mentioned it, I spoke to Pete this morning already, had House been fit on Saturday, it made the difference. We're talking up Ben House now, and rightly so. He's got 5 goals this season already, and we're into November. So if he carried that on, what's that, August, September, October, 5 goals, November, December, January, 5 goals, February, March, April, 5 goals, could finish on 16, 17 goals. That's as many, if he kept the same rate up. And that's as many as Anthony Scully managed over the last couple of seasons as well. So I think that's really important. And actually, Ben House is an odd one because I didn't see him as a striker. I really liked him in the attacking midfield role. We lost Tom Hopper, a lot was put on Ben House's shoulders. He's not the sort of player you can pump the ball into and get him to hold it up. But his work rate is phenomenal. And Eastleigh fans said that when he arrived, that he would work really, really hard. He'd hassle, he'd hang on the shoulder of the last defender as he did for his goal. But he wouldn't score an awful lot. Well, 5 goals so far this season. Not one from the penalty spot either, by the way. I think that puts him somewhere around leading scorer from open play. you expect your striker to be your leading scorer from open play. So actually, he's doing very well. Bear in mind as well, this is a player who started the season injured, who didn't come in for the first couple of games. So he was a little bit behind everybody else when he started. I still think that he will divide opinion because he's not, people love the Matt Reed style striker, don't they? He's big, he's burly, he'll fight and he'll elbow. You don't get as much of that in League One at the moment. Okay, you get the Akin Fenwers and you get the ones that come on late on and kind of make a trouble for themselves. And you get the Michael Smiths at Sheffield Wednesday and the Lee Gregory's. I get that, and it would be nice to have that within our squad, but that's not what Ben House does. And 5 goals in his opening however many games suggests that actually, bear in mind he's only 23 years old as well, we have done well here and we have found a decent player. And for this model that we have to work, and I hate that, but for this model we have to work, you have to sell players. That's how Lincoln City progress. You sell football players. If you sell a defender for £550,000 as we did Teo Eden, you have done incredibly well at this level. But a striker only needs to be 10 goals by Christmas for somebody else to be looking at him, and then you're talking 750. You're talking 900 potentially. And I know it was less for Scully because of the contract situation, etc. But that's where the value is. And it seems awful, it seems crass, kind of 12 hours after we've beaten Bristol City to talk about a striker that we've got in terms of selling him. But I think it's a great reflection on the club's recruitment, how well Ben House has done overall since the beginning of the season. And last night, and it's hard to take a game as a single chapter or a single entity, but Tashan Oakley-Booth arrived in the summer, great game. Charles Vernham arrived in the summer, great game. Matty Virtue arrived in the summer, great game. Paddy O'Connor arrived in the summer, gets a goal. But I keep hearing our recruitment shit. It's not. Things take time. You have hits and misses. There are 1 or 2 players in the squad, maybe 1 or 2 that were recruited in the summer that are struggling a little bit at the moment, be it through injuries, be it through form. But that's always the case. It's always the case. If you go on a night out and you go in 6 pubs, 1 of them will be average, at least. That's what happens. So anyway, on to the second half. I think, they obviously wanted to go for it, and the goal that we got at the beginning of the second half, brilliant time to score, superb. Just instantly nip in the bud any thoughts that they had of getting back into it, because if they get their goal back, even when they get it at 2-1, squeaky bum time. You only need to look at Barrow away. When Barrow obviously, at 2-1, we would never look like scoring at Barrow since the opening goal in the earlier round, and then obviously last minute goal. There's you only take a second to score a goal. If you're 2-1, it is a worrying time. But at 3-0 up, they score. It still felt futile, especially when you're considering how well we're defending. Since we've gone to 3 at the back, I'm happy to be corrected. We've only conceded 2 on 1 occasion, and that was Bolton on the first game that we tried it. And even then, they were 2 individual errors. Other than that, we don't look like we're going to concede a hatful anymore. I really like that. I like a solid team. This might not be spectacular. It might not be, scoring 6 away at Bristol Rovers or whatever. But if you don't concede goals, you're always going to be in with a chance of winning games. And teams will come in Sincilbank last season, not conceding goals. Cambridge, Accrington, Gillingham, Doncaster. And they won games because they had that opportunity. They took their one opportunity. We're now doing that. And a lot of people last season were saying, I'd rather be this team. I'd rather be like Doncaster, resolute and tight, looking for the one chance, than I would Lincoln, as we were last season. I don't want to go down, but if you've got that building block, but you've still got something going forward, and Doncaster didn't have, and Gillingham didn't have, clearly, because they were both relegated. But if you are a Lincoln like we are, and you have got a Danny Mandry or a Ben House or Charles Vernham, players that can maybe just sniff something out. Matty Virtue, I think, is going to keep getting better and better for us, I think, as he kind of settles into regular football as well. If you've got that, and you're not conceding goals, you're going to be in a good place. And look, we are in a good place. I'm so pleased that we bounced back quickly and got the win against Bristol City, because it's shown people that Chippenham result, as bad as it was, and we've lost 40 odd grand for that, and the potential of progress to the 3rd round with Burton. And, if Burton and Chippenham, whoever wins that, if one of them then gets Liverpool at home, it'll be, that could have been our tie, woulda, coulda, shoulda. That's football, isn't it? I keep hearing, oh, if we hadn't got those goals at Ipswich and Barnsley, we'd be a lot worse off now. We deserve to lose those games, but we didn't. And then on the other side, if we'd won games at home that we should have done against Fleetwood and Accrington and Forest Green, we'd be a lot higher up. We didn't. You are where you are. And where we are at the minute is we are a mid-table League One team. And, I don't see that as a lack of ambition. I see that as the most consistent success we've had since I've been a supporter in 40, 30 odd years. So, it's good. We've never been to the League Cup round 4 while I've been alive. I spoke to Roger Holmes on the podcast about it a couple of weeks ago. Last time we did it, we ended up getting 23,000 odd fans, 22,176, I think, in Sincilbank against Derby. We'd take a big draw. We'd take a little draw. We'd take a Charlton or an MK Dons or a Gillingham at home, I think, and hopefully get progress. But at this stage you just want one of the big boys and let's get it over and done with, don't you? We're not going to win the competition, so let's have a Liverpool or a Man United or a Man City or an Arsenal or whoever's left in it. I don't know who's gone in or out, I pay no attention. Let's have one of those at Sincilbank. Let's have a night where fans can go and like the Liverpool game a couple of years ago that everybody missed. Let's just have that. Let's have a moment. Let's have the day out. Let's have something that makes fans feel good about this Lincoln City, as the Liverpool game did against Mike Clapperton's Lincoln City. But to get fans in the ground, to have that atmosphere, we think back to the Everton game in the Cup, for instance, or you think back to going to Everton away. And I'm not one that subscribes to a day out at the football, not when it's my team. Obviously, I had a day out at the football with St. Pauli on Saturday, but I'm not one who goes out for a day out with Lincoln City. I go out to watch football and win a game. But let's have that. Let's get a bit of that feel-good factor back, because this squad do deserve it. They do deserve our support. They're a younger squad than they were last season. We have got some good players. They don't always show it. They didn't at Chippenham. They didn't at Port Vale, but they've shown commitment and desire at Ipswich and Barnsley. They've shown a ruthless edge at times. We keep saying that we can't score goals. We went to Barnsley. Okay, they went a man down, but we beat them 3-0 at their place. We did the same at Doncaster. We brushed those aside in this same competition. In this competition, we've done it at Bristol City. We've done it at Bristol Rovers. We've shown that when we are on it and when things do come together, we are a good side going forward. We can do it. We won't do it every week. We won't, because if these players could do it every week, their parent clubs probably wouldn't have sold them, wouldn't have let them go out on loan. It's going to be a journey. I remember coming out the Accrington game a week ago, yesterday, drawn 1-1, 7 shots on target, by the way. Didn't think we were that bad, and people were saying it's going to be a long old season. If you've got that attitude, you know what it is. If you're going to turn up at every game with that kind of outlook on how Lincoln City are doing, it is going to be a long old season. But if you just go into every game with that open mind, as so many fans did yesterday, I mean, the fans sounded brilliant, absolutely brilliant. If you go into that, it won't be such a long season. And if you get a decent draw in this competition, that gives us something to look forward to when we pick up 3 or 4 points in the league between then, and we get maybe to the next round of the Papa Johns and put some money in the bank. Do you know what? If somebody had said to me mid-table and a cup run, you'd have taken it. Okay, it's not a cup run in the FA Cup. It's not the romance of the cup, but the League Cup's still a cup run. It'd be nice to actually have a little bit of League Cup history, because we have been absolutely garbage in this competition. Again, the Liverpool game, and I remember that, and you talk then about Man City and Everton in the 90s, but outside of that, we've not really done anything in this competition in my lifetime at all. Don't put a lot of value in it. We're not going to win it, but it's still nice to have that. It's nice to do that. So fair play to the team. And look, I'm not criticising fans who were unhappy or angry on Saturday. Some of the reaction was OTT, 1 or 2 people, and a block or a mute, I'm afraid. Talking about corner flag pictures and Mark Kennedy going, and club being in massive decline. It's not in massive decline. We're just settling into where we are. We were boosted artificially when we came out of the National League, because that cup run gave us more money than teams coming out of the National League normally have. It allowed us to have a really competitive budget in League Two the following season, despite the training ground. You know, people were saying that money was being put into areas it shouldn't have been. We had a good budget, and when we won the title, we had a top 4 or 5 budget in that division, and that came off the back of the Checkatrade Trophy win as well. I said when we first came into League One, you know, we didn't have an awful budget, and then Danny left and Michael came in, and the wage cap kicked in, and you know, we were competitive. So all you've seen over the last couple of seasons is actually just a return to the order, how it's expected to be, with us arguably kind of 13th to 19th in terms of budget, maybe. I don't know exactly, something like that. You would expect teams like Fleetwood are kind of pumping in the money now. So he said we're finding out where we are, and this is where we are. And I had the discussion, I can't remember who it was with, whether it was with Chris, my mate Roy, who popped over Monday, something like that. I had the discussion that we're not a Charlton or an Ipswich or a Peterborough. We're not at that level in terms of club size. You could talk about grounds and, you know, not being a million miles away from Peterborough. They've sold strikers for several £1 million consistently year after year. We're not there, like it or not. And I know this gets people's back up. We are an Exeter, a Cambridge, a Port Vale. You only need to look at Port Vale. What did they get? Their home crowd against us the other day, 7,000-8,000, near enough. You know, we're close to those sorts of teams. They're the sorts of teams that we've got to plan a way to beat. But if we can go and take points off the likes of Sheffield Wednesday, Ipswich and Barnsley, it gives us breathing space. It really does. And sure, we are so-called bigger than a Morecambe or an Accrington, but we are where we are. All I say is last night, you've got to enjoy it. We've just got to enjoy last night's win, enjoy the wins when they come, and just not take the defeat so personally. You know, if you're reading a book and you've had 6 good chapters and then you read a bad chapter, you don't put it down and go, this book's shit, it's going nowhere, it's in decline. You read the next chapter to see what happens. That's the way things happen. Right, let's go and have a look at some of your comments, because we've now turned around. My dog seems to want to go home. Morning, Brian, I hope you're well. Morning, mate, what performance last night? Speechless. Good job I'm not, otherwise this would be a terrible video. Kev Green, hope you're well, pal. What a lovely morning. It is a lovely morning here. It's windy and it's chilly, but it is a beautiful morning in the Wolds. I am incredibly lucky to be straight out here. Unless you mean, what a lovely morning because we won 3-1 at a championship side, played them off the park, and are now in the draw for the 4th round. Could be that. Rob Scott, morning, mate. How are you? Have you had your pie for breakfast or whatever it is you have these days? Mr. Barwise, Lincoln City FC in a nutshell this week. We've always been a League Cup side rather than FA Cup anyway. I'd argue we've never been a cup side, Kev, to be honest. You know, when you've been to the 4th round once since you've been in the competition, and yeah, we've had a couple of little runs. We've had Everton in this competition and Man City, who we beat. I'll get that one in for you. Probably should have beat Southampton that year, but you're talking, you know, 30, 25 years ago now. I don't think we've ever really been a cup team. We've actually been spoiled since 2016-17. We have, you know, and even accounting that the FA Trophy or anything, well, it's the semi-final of the FA Trophy. We've got to the quarter-final of the FA Cup. We've won the Checkatrade Trophy. We got back to the semi-final of the Checkatrade Trophy. Remember, we're only 1 penalty away from Wembley in Michael's first year here. You know, we had Liverpool here in the Cup. We've had some great Cup results. Actually, defeat against Chippenham and defeat in the first round was unusual. I think that's why it hurt so much. Nigel Biggs, morning, mate. Well, this morning seems brighter than Sunday. It certainly does. It certainly does indeed. Mr. Dalton, when we made the 4th round draw in '96, was it Oxford away we would have faced had we beaten Southampton? I don't know, mate, to be honest. I'd be lying if I told you. I seem to remember them getting a draw in the next round that looked winnable, possibly. Kate, we've already touched on Kate. Thank you. Mr. Godson, I hope you're well, my friend. There seems to be a vocal minority with a very negative agenda at present. Yeah, I'm not. I think there's always people with an agenda. So they don't like somebody at the football club because that person sacked them or sacked their mate, or do you know what I mean? Like a couple of the turnstile operators have been kind of very vocal. But I think generally, I mean, I touched on it in an article. I think there's a little bit of fear, if I'm honest, in that there's fear that we are going to go and collapse and just go straight back down. There has always been an element of Lincoln fans for as long as I can remember who are not wanting the club to fail, but, and I'm not talking about the normal names here. So, you know, if you think I'm talking about you here, I'm not, because if I follow you and haven't muted you, this isn't you. But there's always been a group of fans who come along for the good times, can't wait for the bad times. And there's a guy I can think of, I'm not going to name him, an old boss of mine, who in 2010, I remember hated the football club, despised it. Went to watch the Celtic game in the away end, came the next day, was swearing about the stewards, poxy club, blah, blah, blah. Funny now, I see him there every week, going in the corporate, that sort of thing. Because, you know, now it's fashionable, isn't it? Trendy. So there are people like that, and I'm not saying specifically him, he doesn't comment on social media, but I am saying that there are groups of people who are happy to come along for the good times, but you know, are also very, very quick to talk about decline, very, very quick to criticise suits and ties and all that sort of thing. Quick to criticise backroom stuff we should be spending on players. Football club's more than just 11 players. Saw somebody criticising Ross Burberry yesterday, saying he wasn't even meant to be brought in to stop injuries. He was actually meant to be brought in to make us fitter and run further and work harder. And we're not seeing that. So there's also people, I think, who are negative through, and I'm going to use this word and it's probably not going to go down particularly well. There are people who are negative through ignorance. They're negative because they don't understand actually what they're talking about. And I'm not talking about understanding football. I'm talking about saying Ross Burberry was meant to prevent injuries when that wasn't overall the case. You know, we are meant to have a better injury record, but that's not, hopefully you know where I'm coming from there. Rob Scott, is this not all typical Lincoln City? Did we not say a fortnight ago with struggle versus Port Vale and Accrington? Chippenham happens, it's FA Cup football. We did. I think I said that. And I said the key to this Lincoln City side being a success, and by success I mean top 10, not top of the bottom half, is being able to beat those clubs. Some people think that if we can't beat those clubs, it's relegation danger. And I think, I can't remember who it was, somebody said to me, it's no good just going and getting wins at the big clubs. You've got to beat the teams in and around you. And if you can't do that, you're in trouble. I disagree. I said that, you know, if we beat the top 6 home and away, I know that's not feasible, but if we did that home and away, 36 points, you'd only need to pick up a 10, 15 draws against shitty teams around you. And when I say shitty teams, I mean that with the greatest respect. But the struggling teams, the Gillinghams and Doncasters and Crews of last season, not club size. I mean how they're doing that season in terms of shitty. And you'd stay up. So there we go. Ben, I'm watching this live this morning. I bet you are. I bet you got me on the big television. Anyway, I'm giving you plenty to talk about on the podcast. Highs and lows within the space of 4 days. Not no, you're right, mate. Absolutely. Harry Jackson, morning, Gary. Great result for the lads, especially since our loss to Chippenham Town. Sorry, the unpredictability of football, I guess. My dog just hurried up. I thought somebody was coming, but they're not. Kev Sewell, great result, but Gaff Hughes is still a clown. I will not comment on that, Kev. I'll present that without prejudice. But he's got no bets on with me this year. Yeah, interesting that. Carl, yes, I know about this, mate. Yeah, Liam Scully just announced safe standing to be introduced in the Stacey West Upper 7, capacity to be increased to around 11,500. So I have seen the press release. I've got an article prepared, but I was uncertain about setting it because of the whole time change and everything. I was trying to work out Wikipedia last night. So if you're watching and you haven't seen it, the news is that the Stacey West development is now going ahead, and it's going ahead 2-tier rather than the original 3-tier. So they're now not planning on putting the hospitality suites into the Stacey West. Rather, it's going to be the grant money is going to be spent on expanding backwards into the car park, and that space is going to be made available for the foundation and for the community, because that's the basis on which we've applied and been successful for with grants. And then we are trialling, I believe, safe standing. So there will be rails put into Upper 7, as I understand, and there will also be a portion of the Stacey West handed over to safe standing as well, or we have applied for that trial. And should it be a success, the long-term plan is for the Stacey West in its entirety to be converted into safe standing and Upper 7, I believe, as well. So, I can see some positivity there. There will be people who, again, kind of will be critical of the fact that we're not raising the Stacey West, we're not doing this and that. I haven't seen whether the plans incorporate changing the roof at all. It would be nice if actually, this is really sad, we kept the view of the cathedral from the South Park end. I think it's one of the most iconic views in football. But the safe standing is really good. And I think it's interesting, given Liam's comments yesterday, because I think somebody had commented on social media saying, you know, we've got to hold them to this safe standing pledge. And I had to bite my tongue because I'd seen the press release, knowing what was coming out this morning. You know, they are being held to safe standing. It's something the club are committed to. And believe it or not, the people at the club who often get stick don't always deserve it. In fact, they rarely do. We've talked about recruitment, but this is a classic example. You know, this Stacey West development has caused the club, you know, so much discussion, especially with rising costs and all that sort of stuff. But if it does go ahead and we do get safe standing and we get 11,500 capacity, then next year or the year after, if we're still in League One and you get the likes of Sheffield Wednesday and Ipswich and Derby and whoever else come down, you get 11,000, you know, break the attendance record this century, it would be phenomenal. So fair play to the club. Andy Blackman, morning mate. Great result last night. I'm interested in some fans' reaction today. Virtue and Oakley Booth with a fantastic performance. Mr. Stalabras, typical imps last night. Consecutive performances in the cup. They're as different as chalk and cheese. Will be a big test on Saturday. Confidence should be high given last night's result. Given our result against bigger, better clubs, we shouldn't be at all surprised at a 3-point haul. In any other business, any news on Mandrew? I haven't heard about Mandrew. Pete says MK is trying to flog him by Ben House. Look, I don't recall the same sort of negativity when Danny Cowley was trying to sell Ellis Chapman to Everton after the FA Cup game. So just a bit of background, Pete's a Man United fan, so he is staunchly not behind a former Liverpool player as our manager, just to say. Kev Stowe, what we currently remind me of is Dyche's Burnley. We can be organised and mixing with anyone as we're defensively well structured and hard to break down. When they're to be dominant teams, say in the FA Cup 5th round tie, they struggle to break teams down who do not, who do what they usually do. There's not many teams able to do both incredibly well. No, there isn't. And the fact you've mentioned that, a team who, you know, we've played in the league in my history, or my memory, who have then gone to the Premier League, is interesting. I'm not saying we're going to the Premier League, but you know, being hard to beat for me is the first building block of a good side. And I think it's what Danny and Nicky put together, wasn't it? We were hard to beat, and that's the starting point. Steve Turner, morning mate. Could have been 5 last night. Matty Virtue is a really good find, and let's hope at the end of the season that he's not offered a deal at Blackpool and we can make him our player, because I like Virtue. I like the idea of Virtue when he signed. Thought it took him a while to get into the game. He wasn't brilliant on Saturday. I get that, but he is a player capable of playing in a 2, and not all midfielders are. Like Lass, I think you need to probably play in a 3. And him coming on last night at right wing kind of also shows you another reason he's always in and around the squad is his versatility. Wherever you put him, you're going to get work rate from Lass. Kate says the draws with the League Cup work differently than the FA Cup. And the FA Cup is the number of the tie, whereas in the League Cup the number of the ball is 2. So if we don't win with the face, isn't the case in the League Cup. Okay, I kind of followed that. Dave Phillips, I go to football to meet my pals, love to watch football, good or bad. I never go with a doom or gloom attitude. Why would you? Yeah, I'm guilty of it, Dave, if I'm honest. I'll go to a game and say, oh, we'll get football today. But I enjoy the day. I don't, you know, as soon as the whistle goes, I don't think we're going to lose. I get behind the team. So I can't understand people who want to be miserable, who want to say, this is going to be a shit season all the time. Enjoy it, embrace it. Shit season's the way you play in Salisbury, and you know you can lay across the seats as you want, like Jacob Rees-Mogg did in Parliament. You know what I mean? You can spread out. You can't do that since Sincil Bank now. Enjoy it. It won't always be like this. Football clubs go up and down. Unless you're a big club. Oldham were making trips to Liverpool and Everton in my lifetime. Now look where they are. Enjoy it while you can. Imps were 5-1 to win last night. Absolute banker, says Shane. I'm no longer a betting man because I'm shit at it. But yeah, brilliant. And Chris Canino, I do love this point, and it's, you know, it's not being facetious. Heard people after Saturday demanding a refund. Are those same bellends saying that we should pay an extra £100 after last night's result performance? Yeah, I don't like that. We should pay the fans back if we don't play well away. And I know some clubs have done it, but quite right. When these things happen, like last night, you know, you don't get people saying, "Oh, there's another tenner. Thanks for the entertainment." That is football, unfortunately. You win some, you lose some. You know, I don't demand a refund, partial refund from the season ticket when we lost 6-0 against Oxford. But you know, you take all the home games, and that's football, isn't it? It's up and down. It's up and down. Shane Clark has had 3 goes at this. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy for some. They live to be miserable. yeah, and some people also are like a stopped clock. They're waiting for the moment that they're right. And I've heard, and again, I'm not naming names, and you know, if you think it's you and I follow you and I've read your stuff, it's probably not, because I do mute and block an awful lot of people now, not because I'm arrogant, just because I want to filter the experience that I have. But yeah, I remember people after the Arsenal game and the Burnley game, bear in mind, games that now get completely and utterly revered by thousands of people, coming away from that saying the cup run will cost us promotion. I'd rather have had promotion. And then you get promotion, you don't hear from them again. Until I remember it clearly, because I was with Pete. We'd gone to watch a gig in London, and it was Morecambe away. We were staying in a hostel, and I took my tablet to write the game up, or write some thoughts on the game. We drew 0-0, and people were saying, you know, it'll cost us promotion. That will cost us promotion. Going to the Checker Trade final, it'll cost us promotion, and it didn't. You know, the playoffs we got to, we could have, should have gone through. We didn't. Checker Trade then financed the League 2 title the following season. We went up. Can't afford to go up. It's going to be a struggle next season. It wasn't. Drew with Oldham that time. Do you remember? Went to Oldham. They went 1-0 up, had a man sent off. We drew 1-1, and it was, that'll cost us. You got to win those games. Even I remember drawing Mansfield 1-1, and it was around the time of my 40th birthday party, actually. And I was with my mate Dave. I remember leaving the ground. He said, "Got to win your own games, draw your away games. If you don't do that, you won't win the title." You will. We did. You know, there are these kind of negative signs. Danny Cowley went, "We're gonna decline." We didn't. Do you know what I mean? We drew with Rochdale, or we lost to Rochdale and Fleetwood. You know, it's going to cost us our playoff place. We're going to drop out of the playoffs. It didn't cost us our playoff place. But they're waiting for that one moment when it'll be, "See, I told you. I told you that if we didn't start winning our home games, we'd struggle. I told you this. I told you that." 6 years of saying, it's like the boy who cried wolf, I suppose. It's not, is it, actually, at all? Thinking about it, it's really not. Because eventually it did happen, but unfortunately the boy who cried wolf, you know, kept saying there's a wolf, and there wasn't. And then when there was, it got him. And at the end of the day, the wolf would have got him anyway, whether he said it or not. If we're going to be shit, we're going to be shit. If we're going to go down, we're going to go down. But, you know, enjoy it. People forget football's a 46-game season, don't they? With cups and all that sort of thing. I think one result spells the start of something, or whatever. And just think about you know, if you have a great life, but you have one bad day, that one bad day doesn't mean that your life's suddenly shit, does it? Chippenham was a bad day. Don't mean Lincoln City is shit. Now we've had a great day. Don't mean Lincoln City are brilliant. It means we are where we are. An inconsistent team that can do it, is going somewhere, that will probably finish round about where we are now. And I would have taken that. I'd have taken that all day long. Right, thank you very much for your time this morning. I'm rambling now. Hopefully you found this interesting. I will publish the article on the Stacey West when I get in. You've got Ben and Jake on the podcast this week. We'll have some content ahead of Plymouth, hopefully, as well. Just going to have to try and squeeze everything in with work, but we'll have the usual referee article and that sort of thing. And I'll see you at the game. I'm hoping to have some books on the Red Imps Community Trust stand on Saturday, whichever ones I've got kicking about. So if you are missing any of my books, do pop along and say hello. Hopefully I'll be on there around an hour before kickoff. Otherwise, thank you for your time, and up the Imps.